Where did William Branham get the doctrine that the serpent was a walking and talking animal but didn't have intelligence until he was taken over by the devil? How do we explain that this is a lie?
So I think what you will find is you can find the roots of that in the teachings of John Nelson Darby. So there was a writer named Charles MacDonald who sort of codified John Darby's teachings in the generation after John Darby. And he included that in his writings. You'll find pieces of that found its way into the Schofield Bible, for example. It's in the study notes of a Schofield Bible. That the serpent, was a creature that was basically taken over possession by Eve. So those are ideas that influenced William Branham. We know I know for sure he had both of those writings. I have pictures of Charles MacDonald's books in his library. We know he had a Schofield Study Bible. So is that where he got it from? Most certainly is where he got the idea from.
Yeah, this question for me is interesting because, and I could be wrong, I've not studied it as fully as I will in the future, but in white supremacy and Christian identity, they were trying to make this claim, and they were pointing to a pre-Adamic race that existed, and the ideology, and it differed from sect to sect, but the ideology was such that the serpent was a part of that race that wasn't the race of the good guys. And that's ultimately the white supremacists. They ended up, this is where black people came from, ultimately. The Bible, if you read Genesis 3, it talks about the serpent being more crafty than any of the animals, of the wild animals. So the Bible clearly talks about having intelligence before the fall. It also talks about the serpent talking. It's telling the woman, we could eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but you must not eat the fruit that's in the middle of the garden. So parts of this question just simply, some of it came from the Bible, but the deeper question is that transition from the intelligence, I think, is where the heart of this question is, because part of this is just straight from the Bible. But that transfer of intelligence, I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, it came from white supremacy, because even William Branham, when he talks about when he first came in contact with the Christian identity doctrine at Roy Davis's church, he talks about how he was trying to say that he denied it initially, but it was making that claim that there wasn't an intelligent being, and that's why the black people are, according to that white supremacy, very awful thing, that's why the black people are the way that they labeled them. But in my opinion, it probably came from white supremacy.
Yeah, John, while you was speaking, I went and I just pulled the book off of my shelf. This is a copy of what's in William Branham's library. This is a commentary on Genesis. And I said it was Charles MacDonald. I'm sorry, it was actually Charles McIntosh. This is basically a codification or a commentary of the teachings of the Brethren, Darby's teachings that was produced after Darby died. And yeah, in here, he basically spells out roughly what we would have believed about that sort of thing, And you're correct, John, in saying that these actual ideas of pre-Adamites come from white supremacists, absolutely. So they were trying to find ways to justify slavery, and they proposed the idea that there was a race of soulless animals that looked more or less like people who God made as animals to be servants to Adam. And naturally, they said that was the progenitors of the non-white races. And yes, so it's basically just piggybacking on those ideas, that saying that Satan possessed one of those creatures and then seduced Eve. And as far as how do we know that that's wrong? Well, I mean, do you believe that God created a race of sentient animals that could talk and speak and were in every way just about like humans, but they didn't have souls and were intended to be slaves? Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so. So, I don't believe God would do a thing like that. And so now if you do, well, that's between you and God. But I just don't believe that God created a race of sentient, feeling animals that are just about like people, but were intended to be slaves to the master race for all eternity. I just don't believe. I don't believe in that.